February 26, 2026. 6:47 a.m. Southern Donetsk front. 4 Ka-52 Alligator attack helicopters, 30 meters off the ground, moving at 260 kilometers per hour toward Ukrainian forward positions. 90 seconds later, 3 of them would be burning wreckage scattered across frozen farmland. The 4th would limp home trailing black smoke, its crew screaming into radios that no one on the ground could answer. This wasn't a dogfight. This wasn't a lucky shot from some infantryman with a shoulder launcher. This was a calculated, intelligence-driven ambush, weeks in the making, designed to do exactly what it did: destroy Russian rotary-wing close air support in a single devastating engagement. I'm your host at WarfistTV, where we analyze the battles that change wars. And today, we're breaking down what Ukrainian officials later called one of the most successful anti-helicopter engagements of the entire war. A textbook kill zone, a trap so perfectly constructed that 4 of Russia's most advanced attack helicopters flew straight into it without ever knowing they were already dead. Real tactics, real consequences. WarfistTV. Let's go back to the beginning. By late February 2026, the southern Donetsk front had become one of the most contested stretches of territory in the war. Russian forces had been grinding forward for months, attempting to push through a corridor south of Vuhledar, aiming to collapse Ukrainian defensive lines that had held since the previous autumn. The terrain here is flat, open farmland broken by scattered tree lines, irrigation ditches, and the skeletal remains of villages shelled into dust over 2 years of fighting. For ground troops, this terrain is a nightmare. No cover, no concealment. Every movement visible from drone altitude. But for attack helicopters, it was supposed to be perfect. The Ka-52 Alligator is Russia's premier attack helicopter. NATO designation, Hokum B tandem cockpit, coaxial rotors, no tail rotor. Maximum speed, 300 kilometers per hour. Combat radius, 460 kilometers. Armed with Vickers-1 anti-tank missiles, laser-guided, effective to 10 kilometers, 30mm cannon, and S-8 unguided rockets. Each airframe costs approximately $16 million. The Ka-52 carries the Vitebsk L-370 electronic countermeasure suite, designed to detect and jam infrared missile seekers, along with radar warning receivers and chaff dispensers. On paper, it's one of the most dangerous battlefield helicopters in the world. On paper. Russian aviation commanders at the forward operating base near Berdyansk had been running Ka-52 sorties along the southern axis for weeks. The pattern was consistent. Flights of 2 to 4 helicopters would launch at dawn or dusk, fly low-altitude corridors designed to avoid known Ukrainian air defense positions, pop up to firing altitude within range of Ukrainian positions, ripple-fire Vickers missiles or rockets, then drop back below radar coverage and return to base. The low-altitude corridors were the key. Russian pilots hugged the terrain at 20 to 40 meters, using the flat ground to stay beneath the radar detection envelope of Ukrainian medium-range systems. The route bent south around a cluster of villages where MANPADS teams had been reported, then cut northeast toward the front line. The same corridor, every time. Ukrainian electronic intelligence units had been watching. Which weapon system was most critical to this ambush? A. The Gepard SPAAG. B. The Stinger MANPADS. C. The intelligence network. Drop your answer in the comments. Signals intelligence operators monitoring Russian aviation frequencies had been cataloging every Ka-52 sortie for over 3 weeks. Takeoff times, flight paths, formation compositions, radio call signs, even the specific frequencies Russian pilots used to coordinate with ground controllers during their attack runs. The picture that emerged was damning. Russian helicopter operations along the southern Donetsk axis had fallen into a rigid, repeatable pattern. Flights launched from the Berdyansk area base between 6:30 and 7:15 a.m., or between 4:45 and 5:30 p.m., always in pairs or groups of 4, always the same low-altitude corridor, always the same pop-up point for weapons release. Ukrainian air defense commanders recognized what they were looking at. Not just an intelligence opportunity, a kill box waiting to be built. Colonel Andriy Marchenko, the officer commanding the air defense sector covering the southern approach, began planning the ambush in the first week of February. The concept was simple. Identify the exact stretch of the corridor where Russian helicopters were at their most vulnerable. Lowest altitude, highest speed, least room to maneuver, and stack overlapping weapon systems directly beneath it. The ambush site was selected with surgical precision. A shallow tree line, running east-west, roughly 800 meters long, sitting on a gentle ridge that gave 3 to 5 meters of elevation advantage over the surrounding farmland. The trees were bare. It was February, but thick enough to break the visual and thermal outline of vehicles parked beneath them. Crucially, the tree line sat directly under the flight path, at a point where the corridor narrowed between two known observation posts. Helicopters passing through this point would be at 25 to 35 meters altitude, moving fast, focused on the attack run ahead of them, and directly within engagement range of both gun and missile systems concealed beneath them. Marchenko's plan called for 2 weapons layers: the primary kill system, a Gepard Flak Panzer, a German-supplied self-propelled anti-aircraft gun mounted on a Leopard 1 chassis, twin 35mm Oerlikon KDA autocannons, rate of fire 1,100 rounds per minute combined, effective range against aerial targets 3,500 meters. The Gepard's onboard radar, search and tracking, could detect and engage helicopters at ranges well beyond visual distance. Against a Ka-52 at 30 meters altitude and 1,200 meters range, the Gepard's 35mm rounds would arrive in less than 2 seconds. The secondary system: a 4-man Stinger MANPADS section equipped with FIM-92 missiles. Infrared homing. Range up to 4,800 meters. The Stinger's seeker head locks onto engine exhaust heat. Against a helicopter in a banking turn, engines at full power, exhaust signature maximized, the missile is devastating. The Gepard team moved into position on the night of February 24th. They drove the vehicle into the tree line under total blackout conditions, engine noise, masked by a Ukrainian artillery fire mission timed specifically to cover the sound. The crew spent 3 hours camouflaging the vehicle with thermal netting and cut branches. By dawn on the 25th, the Gepard was invisible from both ground level and aerial observation. The Stinger section, positioned 400 meters east, dug into a shallow depression at the edge of the tree line. Their firing positions gave overlapping coverage of the same corridor segment. If the Gepard opened fire from the west, any helicopter braking right, the natural evasion direction, would fly directly toward the Stinger team. Stay with me, because what happens in the next 90 seconds of this engagement is one of the most devastating air defense ambushes of the entire war. February 26th. The morning was overcast, temperature -4 Celsius. Ground fog clung to the fields south of Vuhledar. Visibility reduced to roughly 2 kilometers at ground level. Above 50 meters, the air was clear. At 6:38 a.m., Ukrainian signals intelligence intercepted a burst transmission from the Berdyansk aviation base. Flight of 4 Ka-52s, call sign Baran, Russian for blizzard, preparing for departure. Mission: close air support for a mechanized infantry push along the E50 highway corridor. The alert reached Colonel Marchenko at 6:40 a.m. He passed a single coded word to the ambush teams: Zaslanka, shutter. It meant weapons free upon visual acquisition. At 6:44 a.m., the 4 Ka-52s lifted off. They climbed to 200 meters, formed a staggered combat spread, 300-meter intervals between aircraft, then dropped to terrain-following altitude as they entered the low-altitude corridor. Lead aircraft, Buran 1, number 2, Buran 2, offset 150 meters to the right and 300 meters behind. 3 and 4, Buran 3 and Buran 4, mirroring the formation on the left side. Speed, 240 to 260 kilometers per hour. Altitude, 28 to 35 meters. Following the same path they'd flown 14 times that month. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, a small Lelika 100 operating at 800 meters altitude, nearly invisible against the overcast sky, tracked the formation from the moment it crossed the initial waypoint. Drone feed streamed directly to Marchenko's command post. He watched 4 green triangles on the tactical display moving northeast, closing on the kill box. Distance to ambush, 12 kilometers. Time to engagement, approximately 3 minutes. The Gepard crew received the update through their encrypted tactical radio. Commander Sergeant Oleksiy Bondar confirmed radar in passive mode. Guns loaded, turret aligned to the expected approach bearing. His gunner, Corporal Vasyl Kravchuk, had the fire control system warmed up and ready. They'd rehearsed this exact scenario 9 times over the previous 2 days, using simulator data based on the actual Russian flight profiles. The Stinger team acknowledged their readiness. 4 missiles, 2 primary shooters, 2 reloaders. They could hear nothing yet. The Ka-52s were still 8 kilometers out, 6:46 a.m. Distance to kill box, 4 kilometers. The Leleka operator reported the formation tightening slightly as it prepared to navigate the narrow segment of the corridor. Buran 1 descended to 25 meters. The others followed. 6:47 a.m. The Gepard's passive radar detected the formation at 3,800 meters. 4 contacts, closing fast. Bondar switched to tracking mode. The radar locked Buran 1 at 2,600 meters. Turret rotated smoothly, the twin 35mm barrels elevating to intercept angle. At 1,800 meters, Bondar could hear them, the heavy thud of coaxial rotors cutting cold air, getting louder. At 1,400 meters, he could see them, dark shapes against the gray sky, moving fast and low, so low that the rotor wash kicked dust and frost from the fields beneath them. At 1,200 meters, Bondar gave the order, fire. The twin Oerlikon cannons opened up. The sound was unlike anything else on the modern battlefield, a deep, rapid hammering that shook the ground beneath the Gepard. The 35mm rounds, a mix of high explosive, incendiary, and armor-piercing, crossed 1,200 meters in 1.4 seconds. The first burst, approximately 40 rounds, walked across Buran 1 from left to right. The Ka-52 is armored. The cockpit can withstand 23mm rounds. The fuselage is reinforced against 12.7mm fire, but 35mm Oerlikon rounds are a different category entirely. Each shell weighs 550 grams and impacts with over 50,000 joules of energy. The first round struck Buran 1's tail section, shattering the tail stabilizer and severing hydraulic lines. The next cluster hit the left engine nacelle. The final rounds of the burst punched through the rear fuselage into the gearbox housing. Buran 1's coaxial rotor system, the Ka-52's signature feature, the thing that makes it maneuverable, lost synchronization instantly. The helicopter didn't explode. It simply stopped flying. The nose pitched forward. The airframe yawed violently to the left, and Buran 1 hit the frozen ground at over 200 kilometers per hour. The impact tore the helicopter apart. The cockpit section cartwheeled 80 meters across a plowed field. The engine section burned where it fell. Both crew members were killed on impact. Time from first shot to crash, 4 seconds. Buran 2, 300 meters behind and to the right, had less than 2 seconds to react. The pilot saw tracers streaking past, saw Buran 1 disintegrate ahead of him, and pulled the collective hard, trying to gain altitude and brake left. That maneuver saved the pilot from the Gepard's second burst, which passed beneath the climbing helicopter. But it exposed the Ka-52's most vulnerable aspect, the underside engine intakes, directly to the Stinger section 400 meters to the east. The lead Stinger operator had been tracking Buran 2 since it entered visual range. The moment the helicopter banked and exposed its hot engine exhaust signature, the FIM-92's seeker head screamed acquisition tone. He fired. The Stinger missile accelerated to Mach 2.2 in the first second. Flight time to target at 600 meters, less than 1 second. The missile's infrared seeker locked onto the right engine intake and detonated its 3-kilogram fragmentation warhead inside the turbine. The engine disintegrated. Compressor blades, white hot from the explosion, tore through the fuel lines. The right side of Buran 2 erupted in orange flame. The helicopter rolled inverted, hung in the air for a sickening moment, then slammed into the earth rotor first. The main fuel tank ruptured on impact. A fireball engulfed the wreck. How many Ka-52 helicopters did Ukraine destroy in this single engagement? A. 2, B. 3, C. 4. The answer is coming at the end of this breakdown. 8 seconds into the engagement. 2 Ka-52s down. The Gepard crew was already traversing to Buran 3. Buran 3's pilot was the most experienced in the flight, a major with over 400 combat flight hours. He'd seen Buran 1 crash and Buran 2 explode. In the space of 6 seconds, he'd lost half his formation. His instinct was correct. Brake hard right, descend to minimum altitude, use terrain to mask his escape. But the kill box had been designed to punish exactly that reaction. Braking right took Buran 3 laterally across the Gepard's engagement arc. The fire control system tracked the crossing target smoothly. Kravchuk pressed the firing pedal. The second sustained burst, 60 rounds over 1.8 seconds, caught Buran 3 broadside. 35mm rounds tore through the fuselage from the right side. The first impacts shattered the cockpit glazing and struck the co-pilot's instrument panel. The next rounds hit the rotor hub assembly. The final rounds penetrated the left engine. Buran 3 didn't crash immediately. Trailing a stream of debris and smoke, the helicopter continued its rightward bank for another 400 meters, losing altitude rapidly. At 10 meters, the pilot attempted an auto-rotation, a controlled descent using rotor inertia. He almost succeeded. The Ka-52 touched down hard but intact in a frozen beet field. Then, the ruptured fuel line ignited. Fire spread from the left engine to the main tank in seconds. Both crew members ejected using the Ka-52's K-37-800M rocket seats, one of the few helicopter ejection systems in the world. Explosive bolts blew the rotor blades free and the rockets fired, throwing both crewmen clear of the burning wreckage. They landed 200 meters apart in the open field. Ukrainian ground forces would capture both men within the hour. 12 seconds. 3 Ka-52s neutralized. 1 by direct gun kill, 1 by Stinger missile, 1 by gun damage, leading to forced landing and crew ejection. Buran 4, the trailing aircraft, had the most time to react, roughly 10 seconds from the first shot to the moment Buran 3 went down. The pilot firewalled the engines, pulled maximum collective, and banked hard left, away from the kill zone. The Gepard tracked Buran 4 and fired a short burst at 2,100 meters, near the effective limit of the system against a maneuvering target. Several rounds struck the helicopter's right stub wing, destroying the outboard weapons pylon and detonating an S-8 rocket pod. The explosion damaged the right landing gear and peppered the fuselage with shrapnel, but no critical systems were hit. Buran 4 cleared the kill box at maximum speed, climbing to 150 meters and turning south toward Berdyansk. The helicopter made it back to base, but the damage report told the real story. Right wing pylon destroyed, landing gear inoperable, 14 shrapnel penetrations in the fuselage, hydraulic leak from the tail section. Buran 4 would not fly again for weeks. Subscribe to WarfistTV if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because what we just described, a 90-second engagement that destroyed 3 advanced attack helicopters, didn't happen by accident. It happened because of intelligence, planning, and flawless execution. The ambush site fell silent within 2 minutes of the first shot. The Gepard crew immediately began displacement, standard procedure for any air defense system after engagement. Within 8 minutes, the Flak Panzer was rolling south under its own power, covered by the same thermal netting, relocating to a pre-planned secondary position 6 kilometers away. The Stinger section broke down their position in under 4 minutes. Tubes reloaded, equipment packed, team moving on foot through a drainage ditch toward their extraction point. By the time Russian forces could organize any kind of response, an artillery fire mission against the suspected ambush location, the kill box was empty. Shells cratered the tree line 20 minutes after the engagement. They hit nothing but frozen earth and broken branches. 3 crash sites stretched across 2.4 kilometers of farmland south of Vuhledar. Buran 1 was scattered wreckage, barely recognizable as a helicopter. Buran 2 was a blackened crater. The fire so intense, it melted the landing gear into the soil. Buran 3's fuselage was intact but gutted by fire, the canopy blown off by the ejection system. Ukrainian forces released thermal and optical drone footage within 48 hours. The videos, shot by the same Lilika 100 that had tracked the formation, showed each crash site in clinical detail. Wreckage fields, debris patterns, burn marks radiating outward from impact points. The financial cost to Russia was staggering. 3 Ka-52 Alligators destroyed, $48 million in airframes alone. Add the Viker missile loadouts, electronic warfare suites, and support equipment, and the total loss approached $55 to $60 million. The crew casualties, 2 killed, 2 captured, 2 aboard Buran, 4 uninjured but unable to fly. The tactical cost was even greater. If you believe tactics win wars, type WarfistTV in the comments, because what happened after this ambush reshaped Russian aviation operations across the entire southern front. Russian command suspended all rotary-wing close air support sorties along the southern Donetsk axis. Not for a day, not for 3 days, for over 10 days. During those 10 days, Russian ground forces attempting to advance along the E-50 highway corridor did so without helicopter cover. No Ka-52 Viker missiles suppressing Ukrainian positions. No helicopter-borne reconnaissance. Nothing. Ukrainian artillery and drone teams exploited the gap immediately. Without the threat of helicopter-launched anti-tank missiles forcing them to stay concealed, Ukrainian mobile fire teams moved more freely along the front line. FPV drone operators reported a 40% increase in successful engagements during the period Russian helicopters were grounded, simply because they could operate from positions that would previously have been too exposed. The Russian ground offensive along the southern axis, already grinding forward at enormous cost, stalled completely during the first week of March. Without close air support, mechanized units attempting to cross the open farmland south of Vuhledar were fully exposed to Ukrainian drone and artillery strikes. 3 separate armored probes were abandoned after losing lead vehicles to FPV drones within minutes of crossing their line of departure. Intercepted Russian communications from the days following the ambush revealed the scale of the impact on Russian aviation morale. One pilot, call sign unknown, speaking on an unsecured frequency, stated that he refused to fly the southern corridor until new electronic warfare coverage was established. A ground controller at the Berdyansk base was recorded telling a staff officer that the pilots are afraid, they don't want to go south. Russian Aviation Command responded with a series of measures that revealed how seriously they took the loss. First, all low-altitude corridors along the southern front were suspended pending review. Second, Ka-52 sorties that did resume in early March were conducted at significantly higher altitudes, 80 to 120 meters instead of 25 to 35, reducing their effectiveness against ground targets, but theoretically placing them above the engagement envelope of gun systems like the Gepard. Third, Russian forces launched an intensive search for the Gepard unit, dedicating Orlan 10 and Lancet drone patrols to hunting any self-propelled anti-aircraft system within 30 kilometers of the ambush site. They never found it. The Gepard displaced successfully and was operational from its secondary position within hours. Ukrainian General Staff released an official statement on March 2nd, describing the engagement as a model air defense operation demonstrating the effectiveness of layered mobile anti-aircraft systems against rotary-wing threats. Western military attachés in Kyiv were briefed on the engagement. Several NATO air defense analysts subsequently cited it in reports on modern helicopter vulnerability in contested airspace. What would NATO have done differently in this engagement? Would you have positioned the ambush the same way? Drop your analysis in the comments. The tactical lessons from this engagement are significant, and they extend far beyond this single ambush. First, predictability is death. The Russian helicopter crews flew the same corridor at the same altitudes at the same times for weeks. Ukrainian intelligence didn't need to break codes or intercept secret plans. They simply watched and cataloged openly observable patterns. The data built itself. All the Ukrainians had to do was be patient and disciplined enough to collect it. This is not a new lesson. Military doctrine has warned against pattern setting for generations. But the modern surveillance environment, persistent drone coverage, signals intelligence, satellite imagery, makes pattern exploitation faster and more precise than ever before. In 2026, a repeatable flight path isn't just a risk, it's a death sentence. Second, layered weapon systems create inescapable kill boxes. The Gepard alone would have been devastating. The Stinger section alone could have downed one helicopter, maybe 2. But together, they created a geometry of fire that left no safe escape vector. Break left, into the Gepard. Break right, into the Stingers. Climb. Extend exposure time to both. Descend. Hit the ground. The Russian pilots had no good option, and that was by design. Third, the Gepard has proven itself as one of the most effective short-range air defense systems of this war. Originally designed in the 1970s to protect NATO ground forces from Soviet helicopters and close air support aircraft, the Flak Panzer was considered obsolete by many Western militaries before 2022. Germany initially hesitated to send them to Ukraine, partly because they seemed like relics of a previous era. They were wrong. In Ukraine's operating environment, where Russian helicopters, cruise missiles, Shahed 136 drones, and low-flying aircraft present constant threats, the Gepard's combination of rapid-fire 35mm cannons, onboard radar, and armored mobility has proven transformational. This engagement was the most dramatic example yet, but Gepard systems had already accumulated dozens of confirmed aerial kills before February 2026. Fourth, this engagement demonstrated the critical importance of displacement speed. The Gepard crew's ability to relocate within 8 minutes of engagement meant that Russian retaliatory strikes hit an empty position. In modern warfare, where counter-battery and counter-air defense response times have shrunk to minutes, a system that can't move after shooting is a system that won't survive. The Ka-52, for all its advanced features, was caught in a scenario its designers never fully accounted for: a close-range, multi-axis ambush by a combined gun missile system hidden beneath its flight path. The Vitebsk electronic countermeasure suite was irrelevant against 35mm gunfire. The aircraft's armor, designed to resist 23mm rounds, was insufficient against Oerlikon shells. The crew ejection system, which saved 2 lives from Buran 3, worked, but only because the helicopter had slowed enough during its forced landing for ejection to be survivable. Now, the answer to the question from earlier. How many Ka-52 helicopters did Ukraine destroy in this engagement? The answer is B, 3. Buran 1 was destroyed by Gepard gunfire and crashed fatally. Buran 2 was destroyed by a Stinger missile and burned on impact. Buran 3 was critically damaged by Gepard gunfire, force-landed and burned. Buran 4 escaped with significant damage but survived. 3 destroyed, 1 damaged, 0 Ukrainian casualties. So, let me leave you with 3 questions. Was Colonel Marchenko right to wait for a 4-ship formation instead of engaging an earlier 2-ship flight for a smaller but guaranteed result? Could Russian Aviation Command have prevented this disaster by simply varying their flight corridors? A basic tactical measure that costs nothing? And what would you have done differently if you were the pilot of Buran 4, watching 3 wingmen go down in 12 seconds, knowing the same guns were tracking you? Subscribe to WarfistTV, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The farmland south of Vuhledar is quiet now. 3 black scars mark the frozen fields where $55 million in Russian attack helicopters burned. The tree line where the Gepard fired still stands, branches shattered by the retaliatory artillery that hit nothing. The corridor the Ka-52s flew is empty. No rotors, no exhaust plumes, just cold wind over open ground. Modern warfare punishes predictability without mercy, and in this war, the hunters became the hunted in 90 seconds flat. Stay vigilant. Real tactics, real consequences. WarfistTV.